Ethan had always known that his time on this alien world would be temporary. After all, his ship had crashed, and he was stuck here until help arrived. What he hadn't anticipated was how quickly the alien planet would grow on him. The jagged cliffs, the strange glowing trees, and the vast sky filled with swirling colors. It was nothing like Earth, and yet it was captivating. He spent most of his days working with the small group of survivors, helping to repair their technology and learning what he could about the alien species that inhabited this place. Despite the harsh environment, he found solace in his tasks. But there was one thing that made him uneasy: the alien queen. The stories he had heard about her were enough to keep him away. She was powerful, commanding, and terrifying. Her people worshipped her as a living goddess, and she ruled over them with an iron fist. Yet there was something different about her. Some said she was cold, distant, and unapproachable. Others whispered that she had a softer side, one she never showed to anyone. Ethan had no desire to find out which version was true. He avoided her as much as possible, keeping his distance, focusing on his work. He had no intention of getting involved with the Queen, especially not with someone so alien to him, literally and figuratively. It was on the third week of his stay that he saw her in person for the first time. The alien queen, Zorath, appeared at the center of the settlement in a grand procession. She walked with a regal grace, her presence commanding the attention of everyone around her. Her skin was a shimmering shade of silver, and her eyes glowed with an ethereal light. Her armor was ornate, adorned with alien symbols that Ethan couldn't even begin to understand. She was the very embodiment of power. The people around her bowed, some even kneeling. Ethan stood at the edge of the crowd, his heart racing. He had never seen anything so majestic, so terrifying. She was a queen in every sense of the word. Her gaze swept across the crowd, and for a brief moment their eyes met. A strange shiver ran down his spine, and he quickly looked away. He wasn't the only one who felt her power. The air around her seemed to hum with authority. No one dared to speak out of turn, and the once bustling settlement became eerily quiet as she passed. Ethan had never felt so insignificant in his life. But it was more than just fear. There was something else. Something unexplainable that tugged at him. He couldn't put it into words. He didn't want to either. His instincts told him to stay away, to stay hidden, to avoid drawing her attention. As the day went on, Ethan tried to put the encounter out of his mind. He focused on fixing the broken equipment that was scattered throughout the settlement. He worked with a small group of survivors who had come from different parts of the galaxy. None of them had been to Earth, and they often spoke of their travels in strange foreign tongues. Still, they shared a common bond in their need to survive. Later that evening, after the workday ended, Ethan made his way to the small, quiet spot by the edge of the settlement. It was his place of solitude, where he could think and reflect. He needed the space to clear his mind. As he sat on a weathered bench, gazing out at the alien landscape, he felt a presence behind him. He tensed, instinctively pulling back. The air grew colder, and his heart skipped a beat. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was.
"You've been avoiding me, human." The voice was soft but carried a weight of authority. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he slowly turned to face her.
Queen Zorath stood just a few feet away, her silver armor gleaming under the dim light of the setting sun. Her expression was unreadable, her glowing eyes fixed on him with an intensity that sent a wave of unease through him. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but found that no words came out. His mind raced, but his body froze. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Zorath's gaze softened ever so slightly, but it still held that overwhelming presence. "Why do you avoid me?" she asked again, her voice calm yet full of curiosity. Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't want to answer. He didn't even know how to answer. How could he explain to the alien queen that he was afraid of her? That she made him feel small, insignificant? That he wasn't sure if he could stand in her presence without crumbling under the weight of her gaze, but the words stuck in his throat. So, he stayed silent. Zorath didn't seem to mind his lack of response. Instead, she stepped closer, her presence growing even more powerful. Ethan's heartbeat quickened, and he fought to keep his composure. She was standing right in front of him now, looking down at him with those glowing eyes. "I have never met a human like you," she said softly. "You are not like the others."
"What do you mean?"
Zorath tilted her head slightly, considering his words.
"The others fear me."
"They worship me. But you—"
She paused, her lips curving into something that almost resembled a smile, though it was fleeting.
"You avoid me." Ethan didn't know what to say. It was true. He had been avoiding her, but he wasn't sure why. It wasn't just fear. It was something deeper, something he didn't fully understand. "I'm not like them," he said at last, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to be around you." Zorath's expression shifted, the softness in her eyes deepening into something that resembled pity. "You think I am so different from you, human?" Ethan shook his head, his thoughts spinning.
"No, it's just—"
"I don't know what you want from me." The queen studied him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, her silver armor shining in the twilight. As she disappeared into the distance, Ethan remained where he sat, the weight of her words lingering in the air. He had no idea what had just happened. But one thing was certain. He would never be able to avoid her again. The following days passed by with a strange sense of unease for Ethan. He couldn't shake the memory of that encounter with Queen Zorath. Her eyes, glowing with a mysterious light, had stayed with him long after she had walked away. The words she had spoken echoed in his mind. "Why do you avoid me?" Back on Earth, he was used to working alone, relying only on himself to get things done. But here, on this strange alien world, nothing felt the same. There was always a sense of tension in the air, a feeling of being watched. It wasn't just the aliens who lived here, it was the presence of something far more powerful. Zorath, the alien queen, was everywhere. He tried to avoid thinking about her. His days were spent with the survivors, trying to repair their equipment and make sure the settlement remained safe. They spoke in broken languages, communicating as best they could. Ethan helped where he could, keeping his focus on his work. The mechanical systems that kept them alive were complicated, and every day he felt like he was learning more about this strange world. But still, something held him back from fully engaging. It wasn't long before the inevitable happened. Queen Zorath came to the settlement again. Her arrival was announced by the sudden quieting of the crowd. The people around him fell into line, standing straight as if they were anticipating her every move. Ethan felt his heart beat faster. He stood at the edge, keeping his distance as always. She moved through the crowd with effortless grace, her every step sending ripples of awe through the gathered onlookers. This time, however, something was different. She wasn't just observing the people around her. Her eyes scanned the crowd, as if looking for something or someone. Ethan tried his best to remain unnoticed, but he couldn't shake the feeling that her gaze was drawing closer, and then their eyes met again. There was no denying the intensity of her stare. Zorath's eyes were not cold or indifferent. They were filled with something Ethan couldn't quite describe. It was as if she could see into him, past his outward appearance, right to the very core of who he was. It was unsettling. Ethan quickly looked away, pretending to focus on his work, but he couldn't stop his mind from racing. Why did she keep looking at him? He had never felt so out of place in his entire life. For the rest of the day, he tried to avoid any further interaction with her. He worked in silence, staying out of sight, hoping that the tension would fade, But when night fell, Zorath came to him once again. She appeared before him quietly, as if she had materialized out of the shadows. Her presence seemed to fill the space around them, a weight that hung in the air. Ethan felt himself tense up, his muscles instinctively tightening as he stood up. "You try to hide from me again?" she said, her voice calm, but there was an edge to it, something he couldn't quite place. I'm not hiding," Ethan stammered, feeling his heart race. "I'm just busy." "I have work to do." Zorath didn't seem to buy his excuse. She stepped closer, her glowing eyes never leaving him. "You think you can avoid me by staying busy?" Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but stopped himself. What could he say? How could he explain that he was afraid of her, that he didn't know what to make of the strange attraction he felt, mixed with his fear? He didn't have the words for it, so he stayed silent. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the wind rustling the trees around them. Zorath's gaze softened, and for the first time, Ethan saw something in her eyes that wasn't just power or authority. It was something else, something vulnerable. It caught him off guard. "I am not like the others," Zorath said, almost as if she were speaking to herself more than to him. "The others are afraid of me. They worship me. But you—" She paused, her gaze never leaving him. "You don't fear me." What was she saying? How could she know that he didn't fear her? How could she tell that, despite the overwhelming sense of power she carried, there was something in him that wasn't afraid, but rather intrigued? I don't know what you want from me," Ethan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Zorath's expression remained unreadable, but for a brief moment, there was a flicker of something in her eyes. "I don't want anything from you, human, but you are unlike any other I have met. You are not afraid, not in the way the others are, and yet you avoid me." Ethan felt the weight of her words, and something stirred inside him. He had never been one to bow to authority, to worship someone because of their status. Back on Earth, he had seen enough of that, but here, standing before the alien queen, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of respect. Not for her position, not for her power, but for the fact that she was so different from the others. She wasn't just a queen. She was a person, trapped by the expectations of her own people. "I'm not trying to avoid you," Ethan said finally, meeting her gaze. I don't know what you want from me. I don't know how to act around you." Zorath's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was fleeting, but it was there. "You need not act, human. Just be. That is all I ask." Ethan felt something shift between them in that moment. For the first time since they had met, he felt the tension ease. There was no power struggle here, no battle for dominance. It was just two individuals standing in the same space, trying to understand each other. But as the night wore on, Ethan knew that this fragile understanding was not enough. He could feel the walls closing in around him. Zorath, the alien queen, was not someone he could ignore. She was not someone who would be easily avoided. And deep down, he knew that he had no choice but to face her. The next morning, Ethan woke early, determined to go about his tasks as usual. But as he walked through the settlement, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing. The presence of the queen loomed over him, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. She was not just a queen, she was a woman. Complicated, powerful, and in her own way, as trapped by her position as he was by his. He would have to face her again. There was no running from it. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that everything was changing around him. He tried to focus on his work, keeping busy, but there was always a part of his mind that wandered back to her. Queen Zorath. the way her eyes seemed to see through him, the way her presence lingered in the air long after she was gone. It had been a few days since their last conversation, and though he tried to pretend nothing had changed, he knew deep down that something had shifted. He couldn't ignore her anymore, not the way he had before. Every time he closed his eyes, her face appeared in his mind. It wasn't just her power that held him captive. It was the curiosity in her eyes, the softness that had slipped through her strong exterior. It was the way she looked at him like she was waiting for him to understand something. That day, the sun was setting when Zorath appeared again. Ethan had just finished a long day of repairs, his body aching from the work. As he walked through the settlement, he caught sight of her standing in the distance, her silver armor gleaming in the fading light. Her gaze was fixed on him, and it made his heart race. She hadn't called for him. She hadn't made her usual dramatic entrance, as if to announce her arrival. She was just there, watching him from afar, her eyes piercing through the distance between them. Ethan knew that this time there would be no avoiding her. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should turn and leave. But then he stopped himself. This wasn't the same as before. Avoiding her wouldn't make the questions inside him go away. He had to face her, even if he didn't know what would happen next. Taking a deep breath, he walked toward her. As he neared, she didn't move, her posture tall and regal as always. The wind blew her long dark hair around her face, but she didn't seem to notice. She stood there like a statue, waiting for him to reach her. "You're early today," she said when he was close enough. There was no anger or accusation in her voice. It was almost like she was making an observation, not a judgment. Ethan felt the need to respond, but the words caught in his throat. "I didn't want to avoid you," he said, his voice soft. Zorath studied him for a moment, her eyes scanning his face. There was a brief flash of something in her gaze, something Ethan couldn't place. But she didn't comment on his words. Instead, she stepped closer, her movements fluid, like a predator closing in on its prey. "You've avoided me for days," she said. Her tone was still calm, but there was an edge to it now, a quiet intensity that made Ethan feel as if he were under a microscope. "But I've learned enough to know that you are not afraid of me. Not in the way the others are." Ethan frowned, confused. "I'm not afraid," he said quickly, though the words felt strange coming from his mouth. "But I don't know what you want from me." Zorath tilted her head slightly, as if she were considering his words. "I don't want anything from you, human." Her voice softened. "But I have seen you, watched you from a distance, and I know you are different." He wasn't sure what to say to that. Different how? Because he wasn't intimidated by her? Because he hadn't fallen at her feet like everyone else? "I don't know what you see in me," he admitted quietly. "I'm just one human, nothing special." Zorath stepped forward, closer still. Her eyes never left his, and this time, Ethan could see the vulnerability behind them. He could see that she wasn't just the untouchable queen. She was a woman who carried a weight that no one could truly understand. "You think you are nothing special?" she asked softly, her voice almost wistful. "Do you know how long I have waited for someone like you? Someone who does not bow, does not fear me, does not follow orders without question." Ethan blinked, surprised by the raw emotion in her voice. He had never imagined the queen would speak like this. Her cold and distant demeanor had always led him to believe that she was above emotions, above any weaknesses. But now, standing before her, he realized how wrong he had been. "I'm not here to challenge you," he said, his voice steady despite the rising tension in the air. "I just don't know how to fit into your world." Zorath's gaze softened, and for a moment it seemed like she was going to say something. But instead, she only nodded, acknowledging his words. "I understand," she said quietly. "This world, my world, it is not easy to fit into. I have spent my life surrounded by people who do not see me for who I truly am. They see the queen. They see the ruler, but not the woman beneath the crown. Ethan felt a strange sense of sympathy for her. He had always seen Zorath as an untouchable figure, someone who was beyond him, beyond anyone. But now, in this moment, he could see that she, too, was trapped by her position. She wasn't just a queen. She was someone who carried the burden of her people's expectations, someone who had never been able to be herself. Maybe that's why I've kept my distance, Ethan said after a pause. Maybe I've been afraid of getting too close. Zorath's eyes met his again, and this time, there was no judgment in them, only understanding. I will not make you stay, human. You are free to go whenever you choose. Her voice was softer now, almost like a whisper. But I want you to understand one thing. What I am, what I have become, is not just because of my people. It is because of the choices I have made, the sacrifices I've had to make. And those choices were not easy. Ethan nodded slowly. He understood now. He understood that Zorath wasn't just a queen. She was a person who had lived a life of solitude, surrounded by people who only saw her for what she represented, and it had made her cold, distant, unreachable. But now he realized she was reaching out to him. She was trying to connect with him in a way that he had never expected. I'm not here to judge you, Ethan said, his voice quiet but sincere. I don't know what's going to happen next. Zorath studied him for a moment, as if weighing his words. Then she stepped back, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing at the corners of her lips. Then perhaps, human, we should stop trying to figure out what comes next. Let's simply be. For the first time, Ethan felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He wasn't sure where this path would lead him, but he knew one thing. It was no longer about avoiding Zorath. It was about understanding her, and understanding himself, too.